Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Hafid Hachimi. I am from the University of Sidi Mohamed bin Abdellah in Fes, Morocco, and I'm honored to moderate this discussion today, panel 4, which is titled Border Wars and Mobilities / Immobilities, as we reflect on the purpose of this online conference throughout last week and this week. Who needs a border wall? The topic of border walls and immobilities is as compelling as it is multifaceted. Borders usually evoke concepts of divisions and connection, control and freedom, often impacting societies in profound and diverse ways. So in this panel, we will explore the temporal, emotional, and strategic dynamics at borders across different regions. So we would like to have a rich discussion after the panelists present their papers. So we have a distinguished lineup of speakers today, despite having some last-minute cancellations, unfortunately, for urgent circumstances. So we have 3 papers so far. We will listen from Ritapriya NANDY, who will present on the temporal challenges at the India-Bangladesh border. This is particularly interesting given the news from yesterday on the other side of the border, India and Pakistan. So we'll also have Arpita, MISHRA, and Vestal Tiwari will explore the emotional geographies at borders in the Punjab. And we have also Olga DOROKHINA, who will explore cognitive and psychological dimensions in the study of borders, walls, and fences. So I am pleased to give the floor to our first panelist, Ritapriya NANDY. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Greetings to all. It's a pleasure to have been given this opportunity to present my research work. I thank the organizers for providing me with this platform. So the title of my presentation is Border Immobilities, Temporal Challenges at the India-Bangladesh Border. It's a part of my larger research work for my doctoral project, investigating everyday life at the Bengal borderland. My research looks explicitly at Malda and Murshidabad, 2 bordering districts along the India-Bangladesh border in West Bengal, which is a friendly yet contested border with an intense environment of security and surveillance. Now, mobility in the borders is permitted in selective, often unpredictable bursts, regulated through permits, surveillance, and the rhythms of state bureaucracy. And so people live in what can be called as a temporal limbo, constantly waiting for documents, for permissions, for harvests, and for a better time to move. Much of the scholarship on borders and mobility, especially in the South Asian context, has examined fences, the physicality of fences, the violence of militarization, or the negotiation of citizenship through documents. What I'm going to talk about here is a slightly different thing, the aspect of temporal governance, where the state exerts control not just through territory and surveillance, but through time. So, drawing on scholars like Sarah Sharma, who writes about temporal rhythms linked to labor, and Bourdieu's concept of social time, I argue that state imposes power by fragmenting and dislocating the temporal rhythms of everyday life, where waiting becomes a structure and delay becomes a form of punishment. Now, conceptually speaking, borders are not simply lines or territorial demarcations. They are processes constantly performed, contested, and felt. And in today's time, we are bound to recall what Balibar has reminded us long back, that borders are everywhere. And scholars like Mezzadra and Nielsen push us to think about borders as filtering mechanisms that selectively enable and disable movements. But what goes unnoticed is how borders govern through certain temporal logics, how control is exercised through deferral, expiration, delay, and the overall manipulation of time. So, if we think of time as a technique of power, a way through which states administer difference, privilege, and subjugation, borderland people are subjected to multiple temporal regimes. There is the clock of the state, the rhythms of agriculture, the rhythms of season, religious calendars, monsoon cycles, bureaucratic timings of expiration and renewals. And more often than not, they do not align. And the very fact that they do not align, this misalignment becomes a form of control. It is in this context that I situate the idea of immobility, a term popularized by Glickschiller and Salazar, who argue that mobility and immobility are not binary opposites, but are co-constitutive and co-produced. At the India-Bangladesh border, I found that people often moved, but in incomplete, conditional, and temporarily constrained ways. They moved with papers that expired too quickly. They waited for days for a simple signature that never came. They harvested late because the border security forces clock was not in sync with the land's needs. These are not forms of absolute immobility, but they are regulated, fragmented, and temporalized immobilities. Let me share an ethnographic vignette. In a village called Jolungi in Murshidabad, I met Rahima Khatun, a 55-year-old woman who lives just beyond the barbed wire fence near the checkpoint. And every morning she crosses the checkpoint to fetch water and run domestic errands on this side of the checkpoint. But the checkpoint closes at 5 p.m. sharp. And each time you cross, whether you are going to the other side or you're coming back to your home, you need to produce your documents of identity proof. So when I met her, she was turned back from the checkpoint around 4:55 p.m. because the officer did not want to risk the lateness, although apparently she was on time. And with a bitter laugh, she had to accept that refusal because the BSF keeps on deferring such movements by saying come tomorrow or kal aana in Hindi as they speak. So these deferrals underline the access to life's basics and how they are continually postponed depending on what the mood of the BSF is. So her day begins and ends according to someone else's time. Her access, her movement, and participation in everyday life are continuously deferred, characterizing the lives of many like her who live along the border. Another example is that of a gate pass, which is required for many of the farmers who farm the agricultural land that lies on the other side of the barbed wire fence. So you have official access to go and till your lands, but again, your restriction of time is very much prominent and imposed. So you can only go to your land and come back within the very time frame of say 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And 8 a.m. in the language of the farmers is quite a late time to start the farm work because they're not the ones who are going alone. They also carry with them laborers and instruments and tools. So by 8 a.m., the sun is already quite hot. And if you have a day's planning of what you are going to do, that gets disrupted. So I met Noor Alam, a farmer in his late 30s, who showed me his paper documents that gives permission to tend to his own land. But one morning, his pass had expired, and he was not allowed to go and tend to his farm that day because the officer said this is yesterday's document. So there is a profound mismatch between bureaucratic time and agricultural time, and the state, of course, governs through deadlines, which the agricultural soil doesn't. This temporal disjuncture is not neutral. It has material and emotional costs. So crops rot, incomes vanish, people fall into debt, and what's worse, the temporalities of loss are considered natural and not political. These disruptions, I call, are produced by design. The unpredictability of when a gate will open or how long it will take for the higher official to sign a document, these are not glitches in the system, they form the very system. The border, in this sense, structures expectation in a way that always places fulfillment just beyond reach. In the Chaure areas of the riverine islands along the riverine border of India and Bangladesh, where people are doubly marginalized, one for their location at the border, and two for their location at a very ecologically fragile space. This is even more intensified. The Chaure dwellers wait not just for the BSF permission, uh, but for also the boats to arrive, for the river levels to drop, and for the right time to relocate back to their own land, because often during floods they have to leave their homes and move to temporarily makeshift homes for their survival. So this good time is often a fantasy for many because it apparently never arrives. Yet, despite this regime of temporal control, people resist. The synchronized movement with prayer times, with the changing moods of the local BSF officers, and as one reported to me, the key to having this movement go on is to understand how the BSF behaves. So it's like an alternative timekeeping system, and resulting in these acts of temporal resilience, which are small but significant ways of reclaiming agency in an uncertain realm of time politics. What I want to foreground here is this: the India Bangladesh border is not just a spatial boundary, but also a temporal theater. Here, immobility is experienced through delay as much as denial, and waiting becomes a central form of life. The border does not stop time, but it stretches, fragments, and warps it, producing life that is not in sync with the state. But within these warped temporalities, people do build lives. They stitch together their own calendars. They resist with rhythms of seasons and with their stories. And perhaps this is where a different kind of politics emerges. Not one that demands freedom of movement, but one that asks, what does it mean to reclaim time? Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was very insightful, and also uh, it's really very touchful when to see how bureaucratic challenges have a very high human cost, and worse than that, when these are not really considered any political issues, but just considered normal bureaucratic issues. Um, Thank you very much for that. And now we'll move to another presentation, not that far from the Bangladesh-India border on the Punjab. So the second speaker will be Vatsal Tiwari and Arpita Mirsha will explore emotional geographies at Amritsar's border in Punjab. The floor is yours, Mishra.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Arpita Mishra, and today I'll be presenting my research title in the emotional landscapes of the line, lived realities and moral decisions along the Indian-Pakistan border fence in Amritsar. So this study delves into the human and emotional consequences of a significant piece of border infrastructure in a highly charged geopolitical zone. Um, Imagine owning farmland, your family's livelihood, but only being able to access it for a few hours each day, always under armed guard. Imagine needing an official escort simply to perform daily agricultural tasks. And now, imagine a simple request for a little extra time to water your crops, crucial just before cultivation, turning into a heated conflict simply because your natural way of speaking, your cultural norm, is misinterpreted as anger by security personnel from a southern region of India. This isn't hypothetical. As one farmer shared during my field work, such a misunderstanding led directly to crop loss and deeper debt. This is just not one snapshot of the reality shaped by border fence erected inside India, a reality generating profound emotional tumult for communities living in its shadow. My research seeks to understand these deep emotional and human consequences tangled within the wires of the security measures. So, to set the scene, we are looking at the Indian Pakistan border in the Amritsar region of Punjab, a historical tense area. In the late 1980s, India constructed a border fence officially justified as a measure of counter Khalistani militancy. The Khalistani movement is a Sikh separatist campaign aiming to create an independent homeland called Khalistan in the Punjab region and curb smuggling and border movement. Crucially, this fence isn't on the actual border, the zero line. It sits anywhere from the half a kilometer to 3 kilometers inside Indian territory. The direct, tangible impact is documented by Sheikh Khan and confirmed in my abstract is staggering. Over 17,000 acres of cultivated land and belonging to around 11,000 families across 212 villages are now stranded beyond this fence. Farmers face severely restricted access roughly from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., as one of my colleague Ritapriya also mentioned, and require BSF security checks and mandatory escort just to work their own land. So India's border security force, BSF, is country's primary paramilitary force responsible for guarding its extensive land borders. And I would like to show if okay, so these are the two lines in red colors that I have jotted down. Basically, in between them, there is this fence which is created by BSF. And moving further, this fence, therefore, is far more than just wire and post. It's a source of pervasive emotional tumult affecting everyone living and working near it: villagers, farmers, traders, and BSF personnel guarding it, and even local bureaucrats. It actually creates distinct, often highly stressful and emotional landscapes. For the farmers and villagers, this manifests as feeling of disposition, intense frustration, and growing despair linked to lost access and bureaucratic hurdles. This study utilizes the lens of emotional geographies precisely because it allows us to take these emotions seriously, not just as side effects, but as a central part of the border experience. It helps us to understand how this specific space, the fence borderland, actually feels and how that feeling shapes the lived reality here. Given this context, the primary aim of my study is to understand and interpret this complex emotional and moral landscape shaped by the border fence in Amritsar. While my border research delves into the BSF experience, the core question driving this investigation include how exactly does the fence impact the livelihood and crucially the emotional well-being of villagers and farmers? How do BSF personnel operating on the front lines navigate the inherent tensions between state security mandates, what James Scott calls seeing like a state, and the local human realities they encounter daily? How do they manage the significant emotional labor, a concept defined by Hochschild, inherent in their roles? And what are the specific moral dilemmas explored by thinkers like Cooper and Waldo that they face when exercising their discretion? So, to explore these questions, I employed a snapshot ethnography approach, living and interacting within the borderland communities. This immersive method was complemented by in depth interviews, and key stakeholders are villagers, farmers, and critically BSF personnel of various ranks. Theoretically, I draw on a toolkit to help interpret the findings. Emotional geographies, as mentioned, helps grasp the felt impact. Street level bureaucracy pioneered by Lipsky and is vital for analyzing the significant discretion the personal exercise and how their choices shape policy on the ground. Theories of moral decision making from Cooper and Waldo eliminate the ethical challenges and value conflict faced by the BSS. And emotional labor from Hochschild allows us to examine the demanding management of emotions as a form of work. And finally, South Asian borderland studies, drawing upon scholars like Cormol and Agrawal, provide the indispensable regional context. Turning to my findings, regarding villagers and farmers, my fieldwork confirms the reports of increasing emotional angst and despair noted in my abstract. They face significant economic hardship directly linked to the restricted access to their land beyond the fence. There's a palpable and strongly voiced perception that state policies, particularly fence timings and bureaucratic procedures, are completely disconnected from their agricultural needs and lived realities, leading to deep frustration and critique. A stark example of this disconnect and the failure of street level interaction comes from the field observation regarding cultural competence, linking directly to Lipsky's work. As mentioned earlier, a farmer whose loud Punjabi speaking tone was misinterpreted as aggression by a BSF officer highlights how a lack of cultural understanding can lead to direct conflict and severe economic consequences like crop loss and debt. This pervasive despair felt by the farming community can be understood through the lens of emotional geographies as direct spatial emotional outcome of living under constraint imposed by fence. Now looking at the BSF persons, they operate in uniquely challenging liminal space, conceptualized by Turner, feeling neither fully army nor police, often describing it as getting the worst of both worlds. They face immense pressure from overwhelming workloads and documented personal strategies. They must navigate tense, often strained relationships with local communities, all while under the constant pressure of maintaining national security in this highly sensitive geopolitical political zone. This challenging role exacts a significant inner toll, but powerfully eliminated by Hochschild's concept of emotional labor. Personals are constantly required to manage their emotional displays and suppress the true feelings like fatigue or frustration within a rigid system. My fieldwork revealed the severe negative consequences Hochschild described. Emotional exhaustion reportedly manifested in extreme ways, including personals experiencing hallucination due to overwork. The immense psychological strain reached a breaking point in a reported incident where an overwhelmed BSF member fired his weapon in the air out of frustration. This constant pressure erodes their sense of self, leading to reduced authenticity, with personals explicitly questioning their personal and professional identity as a result. These intense strains are inseparable from the constant moral dilemmas which Cooper and Waldo talks about. A key example in defining the public interest, as Waldo noted, is difficult. It is strictly enforced the 5 p.m. cutoff for farmers, security, and BSF schedules, or allowing flexibility for crop survival as personal shared in field. This decision isn't simple. Allowing farmers extra time means cutting into their own crucial 6 hours recovery window needed for rest, family contact, and preparing for the next demanding shift, adding another layer to the difficult calculations. As frontline state actors, BSF exercise significant discretion as theorized by Lipsky. We see them developing informal rules of street level epistemologies to navigate the gray areas where official policy meets complex realities, sometimes allowing farmers extra time despite regulations. Interestingly, technology presents a double-edged sword here, complicating simple enable theory discussed by Litsky. While cameras and drones aid surveillance, my fieldwork revealed that they also add new pressures. Technical glitches create vulnerabilities. The threat of Pakistani drones demands constant vigilance, and the sheer volume of data increases rather than decreasing. The cognitive load, especially with exercise and staff shortages, technology therefore reshapes and complicates discretion and workload in the context rather than simply empowering the officers. So, stepping back, what broader theme emerges from these findings? So, we clearly see human cost of scrutinization, profound impacts not just on citizens but on the state agents themselves. We see the power of emotional geographies in revealing how this border space actively produces specific, often negative feelings. There is a stark policy disconnect between the state logic and the lived emotional realities on the ground. And critically, we see immense burden on the front line, highlighting the pressure of discretion and emotional labor on these street level bureaucrats, all situated within the unique context of South Asian borderlands. So, in conclusion, the border fence in Amritsar is far more than a static security measure. It actively shapes an intense and distressing emotional and moral landscape for everyone involved. Understanding these emotional dimensions and lived experiences is therefore crucial. The research highlights the urgent need for more people centric border policies. This means addressing the practical difficulties and emotional well beings of farmers through measures like more flexible access and better communication channels. Critically, it also means providing for better support system for BSF personnel, including robust psychological services to address the documented strain and identity issues, effective workload management, and importantly, cultural competence training to mitigate conflicts seen in the field. Bridging the gap between the top down policy design and ground level emotional realities, as emphasized by Waldo Cooper, is essential for effective and humane border governance. So, this study aims to contribute primarily by providing empirical depth to emotional geographies, mapping the specific effective consequences of border infrastructure. It enriches South Asian borderland studies with ground level ethnographic perspective, focusing particularly on the often overlooked experiences of state actors like BSF alongside borderlands. Furthermore, it offers critical insights into how street level bureaucracy, moral decision making, and emotional labor unfold within the unique pressures for this militarized border zone, highlighting the profound, often hidden emotional cost of scrutinization. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you very much, Arpita, for shedding light on this emotional fabric of the border landscape in Punjab. Actually, these two case studies, both in Punjab and Bangladesh, India, are so crucial to highlight the challenges that we face and the considerations we need to take in account to build humane border governance. So, to build on these two case studies and to round up our session of presentations, Olga DOROKHINA will explore cognitive and psychological dimensions in the study of borders, walls, and fences. Olga, I'm pleased to give you the floor. Please.
Good time of the day, and thank you for being here. As it was announced, my name is Olga DOROKHINA, and I represent the Sun King Tamar University in Georgia. First of all, I would like to thank organizers and chair for the opportunity to join this session. And my presentation is based on my recently published paper, Unlocking the Potential of Metacognitive Management Approach in Border Studies. While working on this work, I once again realized how important psychological and cognitive perspectives can be for understanding borders. I must say that I'm not a psychologist or cognitive scientist. My background is international relations, but this made it even more interesting to look at these dimensions from the outside. And this topic also is also been touched upon just in previous presentation. My presentation continues this line of thinking about emotional geographies, but it is shifting the focus towards broader framing of cognitive framing. And therefore, my main aim of the presentation is to draw attention to psychological and cognitive aspects in border studies While this presentation is not based on formal empirical data collection, but it draws upon qualitative field insights and theoretical reflection, and it offers a very modest conceptual contribution aimed at expanding the interdisciplinary conversation on borders by integrating psychological and cognitive lenses. So very shortly that about that how we see that contemporary development of border studies. We agree that it is like a deeply interdisciplinary field, and each discipline bring their own tools and theories. This diversity enriches the fields. We understand borders as complex dynamic processes. We agree that they carry symbolic identity forming institutional and legal significance rooted in the specific context. Why psychological approaches matter in border studies? So in recent years, borders have changed, and we see more walls, fences, and securitized borders that they are often framed around national security and migrational control. But these narratives often ignore something essential, that borders are also psychological spaces. And people don't just cross borders, but they carry them, fear them, reproduce them in everyday life. How is approached borders in from psychological perspectives? I would draw attention to one of the early studies that were taken in 70s by German psychologist Müller-Hegemann, who introduced the term wall disease, a set of symptoms he observed in people living near the Berlin Wall: anxiety, depression, insomnia, and profound sense of entrapment. Decades later, journalist Jessica Wapner revived the concept, showing that similar psychological responses can be found in Palestinian towns surrounded by barriers and Georgian villages affected by creeping borderization. And psychological approaches help us to understand the long-term effects of borders, intergenerational trauma, normalized fear, and the erosion of trust between neighboring communities. A nuanced understanding of border perception requires distinguishing between psychological and cognitive dimensions, two interrelated but analytically distinct frameworks for interpreting human experience. The psychological dimension refers to the emotional experience of living with or near a border. It includes trauma, anxiety, the loss, a sense of belonging. This approach draws on affect theory, trauma studies, and research on collective and post-memory. It helps us to understand, by contrast, how rupture, separation, and fear shape long-term emotional responses and social identities. The cognitive dimension, by contrast, explores how borders are perceived, mentally constructed, and symbolically interpreted. On the cognitive side, we encounter scholars who study spatial awareness, symbolic reasoning, and mental imagery. It includes mental mapping, categorization, cognitive distortions, and main questions that are put by both dimensions are that on psychological side, that how are borders emotionally experienced and internalized over the time, while on cognitive side, it is that how are borders mentally contracted, distorted, or misperceived, and how do this mental construction shape behavior and policy. And these dimensions are not separate, they are deeply intertwined. And for example, if someone who once felt fear at the border may later continue to interpret any proximity to that space as dangerous, even if the external context has changed. Emotions shape how we process information, and cognitive biases can intensify these emotions. Within the psychology, there is elaborated, very interesting concept of cognitive distortion. It was introduced by psychologists Tversky and Hahnemann, And it is this cognitive distortion is a systematic error that how people process information and assess a risk. Scholars in psychology and special cognition have shown that our perception of borders often deviates from reality. Borders are processed not just as geographic lines, but as symbols of threat, division, or safety, depending on prior experience, emotions, and narrative framing. And this leads to phenomena like false reassurance, risk misjudgment, and symbolic overvaluation of walls and checkpoints. Neuropsychological research further reveals that when individuals experience borders or walls in moments of fear or stress, the brain encodes not only emotional impact but also a spatial layout of that experience. This process, known as spatial imprinting, creates lasting internal maps of division and exclusion. The result of what some call phantom walls, internalized barriers that influence perception and behavior long after the physical structure is removed. People may avoid spaces, develop fear-based rituals, or mentally see borders that no longer exist. In fact, this term phantom borders has already been coined in border studies, and most notably by Sabine Lioche, who explored how historical division continued to shape political behavior and identity in East Central Europe. I would like to stress, let's focus on one of particular powerful cognitive distortions, the illusion of security. In many border contexts, visible infrastructure such as walls, checkpoints, or surveillance towers are built not necessarily because they offer real protection, but because they generate a sense of control and emotional reassurance. The term of illusion of security has been explored in security studies, especially by thinkers like Bruce Scheiner, who coined the phrase security theater. He argued that governments often implement visible but ineffective measures not to prevent threats, but to make people feel safer. In broader contexts, this illusion becomes even more powerful. A wall may not stop violence or migration, but it can symbolically restore a sense of order, especially in moments of political uncertainty, fear, or crisis. And yet this symbolic reassurance comes at a cost. It often reinforces a sense of division between insiders and outsiders, marginalized communities. The illusion of security is not just a policy decision, it is a psychological mechanism that shapes how we process a risk, fear, and belonging. Other border-related cognitive distortions are that those connected with language, with our imagined borders. We in the digital realm, maps and territories shift depending on user location, creating digital distortions where algorithms redraw the reality. And these forms of distortion shape our understanding of where borders are, what are they mean. So just to conclude, borders are created by humans. Of course, we have that some natural borders, but still that borders that are surrounding us nowadays are created by humans. They are human constructs. And they are built and maintained through social decision, emotional reactions, and mental frameworks. To understand borders fully, we need to understand the psychology behind them, the fears, memories, the identities, and the cognitive processes that shape how we perceive space, risk, and identity. These processes are rarely neutral. They are often influenced by cognitive distortions that when several such distortions overlap, like fear-based thinking, symbolic overvaluation, or special trauma, they create layered misperception and what borders are and what they supposedly protect us from. So psychological and cognitive approaches offer tools to explore these questions and give us a language to speak about borders, not only as structures around us, but as forces that live within us. Thank you for your attention. And here that as it was supposed, it was at Easter week in the road, and this is some emotional photo that how the Easter was celebrated, is celebrated in my country along dividing lines that occupy territories from the other territory of Georgia. And when that lines of division goes through houses of ordinary people. But still they try to maintain this tradition of Easter celebration. Thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Olga, for this extraordinary presentation. And this, indeed, as you have highlighted, it is very crucial to make a difference between the sense of security and the actual and effective security when it comes to border control. As you have mentioned, some measures are not only ineffective in providing security, but may have also negative impact on the social and economic well-being of people, and create fear, bad memories, and they even impact identities on how people perceive borders. This is really very crucial, and thank you to all our speakers for their engaging presentations. And now we will move on to the question and answer sessions. And a reminder to all our online attendees, you can please send your questions by emails, and I receive them line, and I will pass them to the panelists. So I have here a few questions. So the first question for Ritapriya. So we would like Ritapriya to repeat the two theoretical texts that you drew on relating to temporality and rhythm that you mentioned at the very beginning of your talk. Could you please just elaborate on those? Because there seemed to be an interest on those theoretical texts that you drew in the very beginning.
Are there more, or can I answer?
No, please go ahead. We'll go question by question.
Okay, right. So the first theorist that I draw on is Chaire Sharma, who has talked of this concept of chronopolitics, or the politics of time. And I have drawn on her and talked of time as a technique of power, a way through which states administer difference, privilege, and subjugation. And the second theorist that I have drawn on is Pierre Bourdieu and his concept of social time.
A follow-up question to you, Ritapriya, please. You mentioned that despite the misalignment of the clock, people continue to resist the wall. Could you provide some examples of the forms of this resistance observed at the border? And also, can you please elaborate on your methodology for identifying different temporal power structures and their effects on border populations?
Right. So can I go ahead with the second question first? Because
please, yeah. Definitely, you can manage them the way you want.
So I have actually conducted ethnographic fieldwork close to 10 months along the entire border of Murshidabad. And prior to Murshidabad, my fieldwork consisted of the site in Malda. So Malda and Murshidabad are two adjacent bordering districts lying along the India-Bangladesh border. And I had simply followed snowball sampling, and that's how I got access to my primary respondents. And from then and thereon, I got access to a wider number of people because of my prolonged stay in the border areas. So obviously that did not come off as an easy access, because being in the border, that too as a woman, was of much concern for both the border residents as well as my own self. but it was a time-taking process to build trust. So glad that it worked out at the end. And my response to your other question, that is to talk of resilient acts in combating the time impositions. Well, as we know, this particular border between India and Bangladesh is a creation or an extended creation of what the partition gave to us after India and Pakistan were carved out as separate states. So the people over here had to face another partition in 1971 when the Bangladesh was born. So the people have to live with multiple memories of what the life used to be, what their survival used to be at one point in time, and the border did not figure as a material construct. So at one point in time, until the late 1990s, there were nothing like the border fence. And the fence that I'm talking of is a barbed wire fence, not a border wall as often seen in European contexts, but a barbed wire fence. So here, there are places along the border which are not fenced. That is due to bureaucratic disjuncture, that is due to the ecological terrain of the land that the border figures itself in, because much of the border lies in water. The Ganges, the Ganges, which is called the River Padma in Bangladesh, flows between the two territories. So obviously you can't fence the water because the border pillar or whatever the structure or the materiality of the fences would get washed away. So people take advantages of those, and those advantages are for their survival. And those are quite resistances in their own ways, how they defy the border in their everyday lives on a day-to-day basis. And like I briefly mentioned, that the key to understanding the bordered time is also to observe the BSF. So there are times when the BSF patrolling will be in a bit of a lull, probably due to the shift change, or maybe they are going to reassign their duties. And during those such times, people do take advantage of that fluke of a moment. So it is in those ways that people try to negotiate and build a life for themselves in these heavily surveilled spaces.
Just a follow-up question to that specific comment. Did you come across any like high cost paid as a result of those courageous practices that try to resist those kind of restrictions that are put by the bureaucracy? Or how much of a risk that kind of resilience is involving?
Thank you. I will take the key word from your question, that is risk. And people and in the borders are living on risk every moment. So they're risking mobility, they're risking their lives at all times. And it does not need to be a very courageous act to put themselves in risk. It is even simple acts of scrutiny by the state, where they are required to produce documents for everyday survival. Like I said, like the Riverine Islands, they are part of the Indian territory, and to go to their homes in the islands which are part of the Indian territory, you have to show documents, almost reducing yourself to a second-class citizen, because every day, every moment you cross, you have to show your documents. So what is this utter disbelief that the state poses on you, and you have to sort of every time show your allegiance or loyalty to the territory. And even after having papers, you go through that absolutely arduous process of scrutiny of getting your bodies frisked, of getting your goods, whatever you're carrying from mainland to your homes for maybe a family gathering, absolutely ransacked. So these are not just the normal logics of everyday life. I mean, I don't think anyone else who don't live near a border site experience such atrocities, if I may say. So these are very peculiar to the geographical logic of the border itself. You know, there's a river, there is ecological precarity, and you risk yourself every day in order to save yourself, in order to save your farmland, in order to save your home, and in order to save your family every other day. And courageous acts do take place. Some are often caught. If we take the case of cross-border smuggling, smuggling is a reality, even though the frequencies have come down a lot. But even those are sort of done in an attempt to survive in the borderland because of the lack of any other alternative economic opportunity in those spaces.
Thank you very much, Ritapriya, for that. This is really gives more life to your already very lively research, and this is very insightful. So I have a few more questions for all speakers, actually. So let's move for Arpita. The first, I have two connected questions. Could you please elaborate further on the idea of the burden of the front line and how it is felt by the BSF staff? And also, how can the stories, memories, and lived experiences of both border residents and state actors be more effectively incorporated into the formulation and implementation of public policy? Arpita?
Yes, sir, I hear it. Okay. So if I talk about the border of frontline, I feel like you're basically asking me about how BSF controls and manages.
So how it is felt by the BSF staff? I mean, their kind of behavior or their feelings toward this burden of the front line.
Yeah, sure. I'll elaborate on it. So the problem is that I had an opportunity to have a conversation through all the ranks of the BSF, and of course, it was they were really emotional. First of all, because the kind of burden they're facing in Baga Atari border is totally different from what my colleague Ritapriya have talked about. There is more strictness, I feel like. There they cannot leave even for 1 second the field empty, and they the overall conversation that I've had with BSFs were that they only get 6 hours of rest, in which if there is some uncertainty or some emergency situation happening, they have to be there as well. So the time is fixed for resting is only for 6 hours, but if an emergency occurs, they have to in a way handle the emergency in their rest hour slot, if I'm per se. So they're emotionally very vulnerable at that stage, but then they have to take up the responsibility of the uniform they wear. So they say that all the time that I cannot express it. That's why people are, the personals are really stressed at this moment. And there's also one aspect that I haven't mentioned in my discussion, which is the income that they're receiving. So BSF post is not a permanent job, to be saying. It is a permanent job, but after when you serve your time, that what happens is you are not allowed, they don't the government do not give pension to them. which is a very stressful situation for BSF personals, because they say that I'm in a way serving my country. And if my I have spent like 60 years or for actually BSF retires way more earlier because of the stress they feel. They say that the retiring age is of course 60 years, but they cannot handle the pressure. So everyone, like majority of all the ranks that I have talked to, they all said that we take retirements at early age, which is 40, because we have to in a way manage our family income as well, because after serving 40 years they have no income in their hand. What are they going to do? So they say that I have to
Mm-hmm.
also navigate how I'm going to further establish my business or somewhere else, how what I'm going to do to support my family. So in that way, and of course the things about what I said, the emotional distress. Um, they're really emotional because there is also one aspect, which is they do not get promotion easily. So it is a really disheartening thing that they feel. So in a way, they're happy that they're serving. I don't say that I haven't found anything. I just asked them a question like, if you're not happy, why don't you leave? Then they said that of course I have to support my family, and in a way I'm really devoted to my country. I would really like to serve, but yeah, because of course all the fulfillment of their needs are not fulfilled by government, so that's why they're emotionally very challenged,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
vulnerable to be precise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I said that, when I asked them the questions about how these policies are helping, they completely denied that. Some bureaucrats and people sitting in a very distant places, so they just make policies because they don't actually realize what is happening every day to day situation in Wagah border. So what happens is, in India, um, so there are different borders, of course, but when I just moved to the Wagah border, which is close by Pakistan, that's why it is really in a vulnerable and always in a state of constant. Uh, what do I say? Constant vigilance. If I say, they always have to be there. So in that way, they say that people are actually not coming here and experiencing things, and the policies are always made in a very far-fetched manner, which only fulfills the very little, the minimal amount that they feel. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
my presentation I've highlighted few of the things that
Mm-hmm.
be done. Why not?
Okay, so no, thank you very much for that. This is really very interesting, and a follow-up to that. So basically, what I understood from you is that even though these stories and emotions and lived experiences are kind of structural, but there is a mismatch or there is a misbridge between those realities and the bureaucrats that formulate public policy at the upper level. So. Uh, how do you, in light of your findings, what specific policy changes do you believe could help address these emotional burdens and foster more empathetic governance in border regions like Amritsar?
Yes, sir. First of all, when I've had a conversation with them, they really want the pension stuff. They want, like, they would love to, they are always trained in a manner to be disciplined, and they work almost like just leaving 6 hours away. They work all day and night, and that's why they're so disciplined. So it happens that I've had a conversation with them. They highlighted that they really want the pension thing to secure their
Mhm,
financial stability further, even after they retire, so they can also give 20 more years to the country. But because the financial stability, it has a larger say in their constant involvement with the duties that they're doing it. In a way, they said that the duties that they're serving in India is basically way more overwhelmed, because the salary that they're getting is in a way minimal according to them. and the emotional labor that they're practicing is like unbearable to them as at this moment, because of course they have to leave their family. They do not have cell phones, sir. They don't have cell phones. They only get their cell phones in those 6 hours. But if there is an emergency, they cannot call to their parents, and if something happens in their family cannot like immediately contact. There is a chain that they have to follow, because of course they're allotted in a very separate places, or even when they have to go accompanying the farmers beyond the zero line. So it is a very far-fetched matter. So these are the emotional things that they're getting into. So I asked them if they get psychological help from a psychiatrist. So basically what happens is that, so they said that they do have a psychologist who asks them and something like that. But now, because of the things, the emotional burden that they're having is like not manageable by them, even with the help, the kind of minimal help they are getting. The thing is that the psychologist only comes 6 months, like in a span of 6 months once. So what are they gonna what to whom they'll contact, to whom they'll have a conversation about what are the problems they face? And if they go to their superior, the superior always says that, hey, you just don't want to work, that's why you're making excuses. So this demotivates them as well whenever they're having. So the incident that I highlighted, one of the PSF persons told me that he became so frustrated that the weapon that it was allowed for him to like safeguard the farmers and everything, he just exploded in the air, and a lot of legalities were against him. But the problem was that, so he is not mentally stable. No one is actually understanding the gravity of the situation at this moment. So they want that a psychologist should be implemented along with every cadre and all the time, so that it can be helpful to them. Those are all.
Thank you very much, MISHRA, for this very constructive comment on this. And it's really a big challenge, and your research provides a lot of potential solutions for improvement. So let's hope for the best. Moving forward, I have 2 questions for Olga as well. Olga, you highlighted the role of cognitive distortions in shaping border dynamics and policies. So how can integrating psychological perspectives into border studies help counteract these distortions and promote more constructive cross-border interactions or peace-building efforts? This is the first question. They have another one for you afterward.
Okay. No, first of all, thank you for all presenters, because they already gave me some additional inspirations that how it's possible to develop that the directions that I started and presented right now. And with related to the cognitive distortions, first of all, it is very important to fix them. That to realize that it is really distortions, because that cognitive distortion, it is not that some mistake, it is not errors that we are thinking wrongly. It is about that how we perceive and how we proceed the information we have. So just if it is like we can all have the same information, but based like on some, like, I don't know, cultural background, some our like family emotions that we have, that some, I don't know, psychological mental health conditions, that we proceed the same information in different ways. And so we proceed that as the output, we all have something different at the end. So first we have to recognize that this is cognitive distortion, and then just to explore it more, that what is behind it. So what is taking us to this this or that type of decision, and isn't it manipulated somehow? Because sometimes it is also that's the way that these distortions are manipulated, and especially in the context of this security illusion distortion. I would also like to say that sometimes there is some is distortions of border bias, that when we do not, it's when the border plays opposite roles, that when we divide it by border, I don't know if it is that it is the same Arpita MISHRA, that because there is one wonderful work about this, about border biases, when there was conducted one experiment about some natural disaster issue, and the group of people was given a map with a border that was drawing as a very like thick line on the border, and the effect was that people that on the other side of like border, that who was living from the side where that natural disaster was not actually going on, they were accepting the risk as a lower cost, so they were not accepting it as real cost. So we have to consider this like a very different aspects of that bring us these distortions. And what is mostly important, that what they are multi-layered, because that one is security illusions, other is from the digital borders distortion. So when they layered, they bring like even more distorted perception of reality, and we have to consider it, especially as a scientist, but especially it is important during policy planning, that when it is considered during policy planning, then that border policies could be like more human based, that more like conceivable and more attractive for those who have to cross them. So,
Thank you very much for that. And are there any practical tools or approaches that can help shift this cognitive distortions around borders and reframe them as spaces of connection rather than exclusion?
I'm not sure that if there are that any tools, but I guess when we know something that is problem, then we have to like research it, to re-articulate it, and to think that how to react to it. So during this reaction, it is possible, I believe, I'm sure that it's possible to refrain and to make it as in another positive aspect. And even in border studies, we have the concept border as a resource. So it's just okay that border is a problem, but border is a resource. So that's it was said that for some groups it is used as for illegal operation. A border is a resource, but for our societies, I mean, for mine, also from those that wonderful ladies were talking, that it is really important how it is possible to use it for like peacemaking, for peace reconciliation of those that who are divided by these borders. Not in my case, even it is not border; it is like dividing lines. So, and when that something artificial, we see something artificial. Why at all I started going this direction? Because when I was traveling to these regions that are divided by fencing, by so-called borderization, I realized that people started talking about dividing line as a border. So that was like very, they had already mentally accepted it. So it was very important, and still there is a lot of potential that to bring them from to cooperate with the other side of the conflict through trade markets or some emergency issues from healthcare workers. That in our case, for example, this healthcare diplomacy works quite a lot, and so that is an opportunity.
You spoke of this concept of illusionary security, which is really indeed very true and very interesting. But I have a question here asking, could you please provide some examples on how this concept manifests at the Georgian border, for instance?
Yeah. In case of Georgian context, we have Georgia is famous, I would say, for the concept of borderization. What it is? It is a line that, due to that civic war and then the war in 2008, we have part of Georgian territory is occupied, and now it is that de facto authorities try to make kind of to turn that former administrative line, to turn it to the real border. So they are talking about delimitation, demarcation process, and they are starting to put in fences. They are starting to put signs of borders. They are making some different acts that formally, visually make it as a border. So it's in this case. It's this borderization and illusion of security for whom? Because it's no. When you put the border, it means that no one can enter it, and so that you feel secure. But in this case, it's opposite. It creates illusion of insecurity, because that people. Opposite, that if you see this fence, that it creates that anxiety, that trauma, that memories that before there was no no border, you were easily able to go through this border and so on. So so in case of Georgia, it's we can talk more about that illusion of insecurity. Also, it is the borderization is provided as issue for security, but from the other side, from those who lived on the occupied territories, but it is not also for them as well secure.
Interesting. We have discussed a lot of dimensions of border issues, but for states, for any state, basically border is where their sovereignty starts. So it's by definition a political question to states. And it was interesting when Ritapriya mentioned that the most of the issues she researched, they were not considered political, but rather they were considered bureaucratic and so on. So my question to all of our three speakers, do you have any examples or insights on how actually politics do change realities in borders, in addition to all what you have highlighted? Now we have, an instance as of yesterday, there were some border tensions between India and Pakistan. And just last year, we had a huge political change in Bangladesh, which really affected the bilateral relations with India as well. And we have a lot of other interesting political events by the day that affect the situation in Eastern Europe, Georgia, and so on. So can you please provide some examples on how political initiatives or political realities can really change the realities at the border beyond this wealth of information that you provided, which has to do with temporal, with a lot of other bureaucratic, human, structural reasons. So please, if you want to jump, any of you is welcome.
Yeah.
Yes, Arpita.
Yes. So while I was in my field, so I come across this trade union, which is formed in near Wagah-Atari border. So, sir, what happened was a few years back, there was a Pulwama attack happened in India. So, because of that, the border which is shared from India to Bangladesh, and through Bangladesh they used to go to Pakistan. So that chain immediately stopped. So all of a sudden at night, there was this government notification which says that no trade will be happening from Pakistan to India. So it really hampered it, like a lot of farmers committed suicide because of that particular news. And recently at this time, sir, the situation is really severe. They showed me the areas where they have the trucks and it is all barren. They said we have to sell trucks to like just get the living out of it. So they formed a trade union. They marched from Punjab to Delhi to have a conversation with it, but no, like still it is stopped. So farmers, the traders, specifically traders, are really devastated with this news. And they be like, all of them have maybe migrated from the place in search of work. Several of them committed suicide. There were handful, they showed me all 12 people. There were only 12 people left in that area who said that we are surviving. So this is the lived
Wow.
experience that I face. And of course, the yesterday the Pahalgaon incident that happened in India, the terrorist attack. Sir, of course, in Wagah-Atari border, I feel like the security has been a top-notch one, and the BSF, specifically BSF workload increases more. So I don't know what are they gonna do now emotionally. So yeah.
Yeah, it's getting from bad to worse then.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any other comments on this political dimension of the border situation, Olga or Ritapriya?
Maybe
Yes,
I
Olga,
just
please.
shortly that like what I mean the most like vivid example we have now is that in Ukraine, that when politically it was decided like to shift the borders of Ukraine, that and we now that have this full-fledged war in Ukraine. But I hear that want also to bring that the same maybe question or reflection that sometimes that it is opposite, that some on the political level there is some decision. I will talk on the example of Georgia when because our borders are not, most part of them are not fully delimited or demarcated. So maybe for some portions of these borders, Georgian Armenian or Georgian Azerbaijani, they are like already like politically there is some decision. So that's more or less there is some agreement, but they politics are not do not have courage enough to make it as a politically decided, so to sign some documents, because for sure there will be some how it will be accepted by society. So and here that is the other part of the same question, so that how it will be affected that communities, especially with huge history, and when that territories were coming back for us between the territories and so on. So that's my like some reflection from this.
Great. Ritapriya, any comment on that?
Yeah, so as we all know, we are living in very stringent citizenship regimes, and the National Register of Citizens, which was passed in Assam, compounded with the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019, have really created a stir in India with regard to how the minorities are living in the country or how they belong. And the whole exercise was attempted to pinpoint illegal migrants living in Assam and to lead to their deportation. Now, in my field site, which also, like Assam, shares its border with Bangladesh, uh, although no such stringent citizenship exercise has been practically implemented, but people still live in the fear of an NRC or happening in West Bengal. So during my entire time on the field, I was suspected as an NRC agent, a government agent who would facilitate the implementation of such a scheme in order to gather data from these people. And they were visibly anxious and scared to speak to me or open up to me. So obviously these policies, whether we like it or not, they have their repercussions on the everyday lives of people. And like you mentioned about the Bangladesh conundrum that happened last August in 2024, that also really created a stir because suddenly there was this attempt to speed up the fencing process in the border. And obviously the security was doubled, their frequencies, their timings. They were more stringent and more securitized, obviously. And since most portions of the border is fenced, with little portions remaining unfenced because of a number of reasons, so the portions which were unfenced saw a lot more of activity and suspicion, because those were the spaces through which you can apprehend people coming in or trying to move out. So yeah, certain aspects of these policy initiatives from the state do hamper the everyday life of people, and they are more compounded at the border level. Firstly, because they are already at the margins of the state, if we may say so. They are literally at the border of the state. Secondly, being at the border has their own sets of anxieties. They are always almost suspected to be illegal, quote unquote, Bangladeshis, because that's the easiest figure to identify an illegal migrant. The figure of the illegal Bangladeshi is so much ingrained into our mind and politics that we hardly distinguish what the political narrative is and what the lived reality is. And thirdly, I am of course talking of minority Bengali speaking Muslim population who bear the brunt of almost all policy exercises, and at the same time are supposed to prove their allegiance, prove their loyalty, prove their belonging to the Indian state almost always whenever any fiasco happens.
Thank you very much for that. This is really great. As we reflect on your insightful comments, all of you three speakers, this is a great invitation to everybody to consider how borders in our own different contexts create opportunities and the challenges. So let us continue to explore these solutions you propose that prioritize basically humanity, equity, and collaboration in managing these spaces. I express my deepest gratitude to our esteemed three panelists for your exceptional research contributions, and to the audience as well for your thoughtful engagement. And thank you very much for joining us, and have a good rest of the day.